so much for your fight.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on the program. We could not listen. You've been tracking politics slightly longer than our show, but our jaw's on the floor watching these old clips. Our jaw's just on the floor watching these allegations.
I just watched it. I mean, it's amazing. It takes your breath away.
It does. Can you help us maybe understand the man who is Barack Obama?
Yeah, I think I can a bit. First of all, I started this whole thing in 2018. That's when I first got the complete story of Biden's bribery from a very, very highly placed informant and a world-renowned investigator. And they brought to me all the corroboration. It was like 5 witnesses, a tape, documents, money laundering. So this case could have been prosecuted, Ben, 4 years ago, successfully. And Biden would be where he belongs in the slammer. Hunter would be in some kind of rehab or prison. And they covered it up. Now, the family has been crooked for 30 years. That's what the hard drive proves, beyond any doubt. You got transactions going back 30 years there. Also, I spent some time investigating them with the Delaware police, because the Delaware police hate them. In fact, if you might remember, they endorsed Trump. They basically have told me, but they're all afraid to testify. The family's been dirty for all the 30 years. They would describe it as like trailer trash moving up to international criminals. And they've been a menace for the state for years, engaged in bribery, cheap little payoffs for this and that and the other thing, constantly getting in trouble and getting their people out of trouble. So what you're describing is probably there's probably a bunch of examples like that. If anybody had the time to just go dig out what the Bidens were doing 20 years ago, 15 years ago. It's a long-term criminal conspiracy, the Biden crime family.
So there's a question that I've been hoping to ask you for years because of your appearance on my favorite show, Seinfeld. There is a line where Frank Costanza is talking about his son, George Costanza, and he says, "My George isn't clever enough to hatch a scheme like that." And we say that line often on the program. You've appeared in Seinfeld. You've been name dropped in Seinfeld. In fact, the show was very kind to you.
Yes.
You cracked the case of the fat in the non-fat yogurt. If I'm
right, yeah.
Am I correct?
As if it was yesterday. It was the morning after I was elected mayor of New York City. I did it in the hotel where we had our celebration. I had no sleep that night. Wasn't bad for no sleep.
It's a legend. Our producers are melting down. They love this. They were hoping we were. So there's a line, but there's a point here. There's a line where Frank Costanza is like, my boy George couldn't come up with a scheme like that. He's not smart enough. And that's what we say about Biden all the time. And that's what we say about the Biden family, is that they're not smart enough to come up with this stuff. And as you hear the timeline laid out by James Comer saying it was only when Biden bowed out of his presidential aspirations that he was given all these plum goodie baskets of China and Ukraine.
100%.
And everyone was able to look the other way. So was this a payoff?
It could be. You could divide, if you wanted to be a biographer of this guy, you could divide the poor man's Biden and the rich man's Biden. The poor man's Biden was probably the first 15, 20 years where they would take in 5,000, 10,000, 20,000. They got the job for Hunter, the no-show job with the bank. And then Joe all of a sudden turns into a Republican on banking. On the bankruptcy bill, he was the only Democrat to vote with the Republicans because the MSNA bank wanted him to vote that way. And there was a big scandal about that and speculation. He was getting paid off by that. But nobody followed up on the speculation. And then once he hooks up with Obama, we go from small-time trailer trash, Delaware, they'll take anything anybody will give him, to, big dough. And you know where he made the most money? When Obama made him a point man. So I don't know what point man meant, but now I know. Point man meant that he gets appointed like in Iraq, and he's appointed the point man for Iraq. And he's supposed to do something for us. He's supposed to negotiate the status of forces agreement so that we can keep troops there and they won't be persecuted by the Iraqi or Iranian governments because they would get immunity. I don't know any other time when we didn't get it. He fails, like he always does.
Yes.
We find out later that his brother got a $1.5 billion, got a piece of a $1.5 billion housing contract in Iraq. And his brother is not a builder. So this is similar to what happens with Hunter, where he gets millions to be on an oil company. He's nothing about oil.
Yeah.
But that was one of the first big, giant Biden payoffs for being vice president. Then he becomes point man on Ukraine. And the fact that he's named point man, and people don't pick this up, is why the head of Burisma comes to him. Because the guy says to himself, Ukrainian government's going to come after me and take my company away. There's one guy in Ukraine more powerful than the president, Poroshenko. It's Biden, because Obama's given him control of the money. So I'm going to pay him off. And he does. That's the affidavit with the $5 million for Hunter, $5 million for Joe, and then a continuing almost $2 million a year for the company. And I'll give you one more that we don't know the answer to. There are definitely laundered payments to them. I have only one picked out by the Latvian government. It was for $1.3 million. There is a witness who is willing to uncover the rest, but for 3 years, the FBI has refused to interview her, including Bill Barr, who never interviewed her, who there's something really wrong with, by the way. The idea that they put this guy on as if he's telling the truth is a joke. This is the guy who hid the hard drive for a year. Only a corrupt attorney general would hide a hard drive with 100 crimes on it. So, and they never point that out. And then they keep saying, well, how come Trump didn't believe him when he said, I investigated the election and nothing happened? Because the guy, Trump at that point knew he had corrupted the hard drive. He had sat on it for a year. And if you put it out, Trump never would have been impeached and Biden would have gotten destroyed.
Yes.
So, I mean, there's a lot to the fact that Obama put them in the big leagues. Let's think of them as AAA criminals. And all of a sudden they go right to the big leagues with Obama. And Obama's got to be calling the shots now. He's got to be. Yeah. This guy can't think his way through. I mean, what happened to Mitch McConnell could happen to Joe any day. Any day he could get up there and go.
Well, he does virtually every day. Yes.
He's right there.
So, Mr. Mayor, when you hear the news from the FD 1023 from the FBI that there are tapes of Joe Biden committing bribery on audio, when Greg Kelly of Newsmax says that these tapes will be dropped, or tapes of Biden crimes will be dropped between now and October, can you illuminate, based on what you know of the evidence against the Bidens, can you illuminate for us, like, what are on these supposed tapes? What will they reveal? Have you ever heard anything like this? Have you heard the tapes? What evidence exists out there that we don't know about as of yet?
So here's what I've heard and what I've not heard. I've heard portions of tapes from the Ukrainian side, meaning there were, I think this is going to refer to a certain period in 2016. The month of February 2016 is critical to this bribery scheme and to Biden's criminality, because on February 1st, February 2nd, the prosecutor in Ukraine, who's supposed to be crooked and not going after Burisma, crushes Burisma. He issues an arrest warrant, which in Ukrainian law closes the business. It's not like here. It closes, there's no presumption of innocence. Business is closed, guy can't make a penny now. Remember, Zlochevsky paid Biden to protect him, and now he's getting destroyed. You now see 4 one-hour conversations between the vice president of the United States and the president of Ukraine within 4 hours of that order becoming public. And then over the next week, you have 4 lengthy conversations between them. Poroshenko, the president, relates them all to Shokin. So Shokin hearsay witness that can tell you this is what the president told me Biden said. Biden said he wants you gone. He wants his own prosecutor here. I'm not getting the money unless that happens. We got to do something. I need that money. The country had like, when the crooks left, the country had like $1 million in the bank. And this is a billion. And these guys were close friends. And then these conversations are tape recorded. Now, OAN has gotten a little bit of these tape recordings from the Ukrainian side. They include, it's being made clear that Shokin is not corrupt because the president of Ukraine tells Biden, you know, I can't go with that corruption thing. There's no evidence of it. And Biden says that's okay. So now we know that's a complete charade. Then, and I don't know why they don't point this out, Biden gets to approve the new prosecutor. How do you get to approve the new prosecutor? A foreign country. He gets rid of the prosecutor, and then he gets his own. It's like what he does now. He gets his own prosecutor. There are also other conversations that Shokin has related about other dealings they have. Now, I am suspecting that when you get the full recordings, it's going to corroborate Shokin on that. Because so far, everything Shokin has told us has turned out to be 100% true. And I've had lots of witnesses and informants in my life. And if you can corroborate about a third of what they're telling you, it's right on the money. The rest of it's going to turn out to be true. But I don't know exactly what's on them. But I think what you're going to find out is it's going to cover, it may even cover the president of Ukraine's bribe, because he got money here and nobody's talking about that. And Poroshenko got big money, more than Biden.
Wow.
And Zelensky knows the whole thing. Wow. So think of the extortionate material Zelensky has on Biden to squeeze our president for as much money as he wants.
That's exactly right. So you believe that, of course, that this scheme is still going on. This is still happening, and that the Ukraine war. Yeah, I
do not think that the second most corrupt country in the world all of a sudden became honest just because there's a war going on. War usually brings out the worst in the crooks. Yes. That's when they steal the most money.
Yes.
I mean, they were stealing during the last war, and they may even be patriots, and somehow they can rationalize it. They may be fighting for Ukraine on the one hand and stealing half the money that's supposed to be for the arms on the other. They did it in 2014. No reason they wouldn't do it now. The problem is we have a compromised administration on Ukraine and on Russia and on China. You know, the amazing thing, Ben, is the guy went and took money from foreign governments, but they're not just any foreign governments. They're either our biggest enemies or our most questionable allies, or yes. ally maybe not. I mean, they're in critical parts of the world to American national security. Look at the one act that I think proves that he's compromised by China, giving up the Bagram Air Base for no reason, 400 miles from China. He could have gotten out of Afghanistan and kept the air base like we did in 30 other countries. Mm-hmm. When do you get an air base 400 miles from your enemy? And who gives it up but a traitor? Yes. He got nothing for it. In fact, we gave away $85 million in arms rather than getting something for it. He wanted to get out of there no matter what. That had to be a payoff to China. There'd be no other reason to explain it. He's not that nuts, I don't think. At least not then. That was a couple of years ago.
And they're so ashamed of it. We just passed that anniversary of the disastrous and suicidal pullout of Afghanistan. They didn't even. Yeah,
there's nobody in the world.
They didn't acknowledge the deaths of Americans. They didn't say anything about it.
And there's nobody in the world that can possibly explain why an American president would give up an air base, a modern one, where we spent billions just fixing it, considered one of our best air bases, 400 miles from our biggest enemy.
And the suicide bomber.
In an era of missile and aerial war, you have got to be a traitor doing that.
The suicide bomber who killed 13 Americans came from Bagram. It was a prison, and he was a prisoner at Bagram. So Joe Biden giving up that base actually directly led to the death of 13 Americans and most likely many, many more. You know our Constitution front and back, sir. You are a big fan of our Constitution. Obviously, you know Article 2, Section 4 about the impeachment clause for the executive. It lists, before high crimes and misdemeanors, which everyone knows, it lists treason and bribery as the two top charges to impeach a president. Your thoughts on the impeachment of Joe Biden?
It should have happened a long time ago. I mean, they're way beyond the collecting of evidence stage. 3 years ago, I had more evidence on Joe Biden than any case I ever successfully prosecuted.
Wow.
And I prosecuted some very, very important cases. There is so much evidence on Biden. It's an embarrassment. I mean, you have to presume people innocent, but I've never seen a person where nothing's been done to them with this amount of evidence. He's virtually confessed it. He's virtually admitted it. There are bank documents proving it. There's a completed money laundering transaction where he clearly got money. When they say there's no evidence that he got money, that ignores about 20 situations where you could show that he got money. His son would be the principal witness against him, not on the stand, but on the tape recordings and the texts that exist. You put those all in evidence. His son says, how about this? His son says, for 30 years, I've given my father half of my income and paid for all the expenses of the family. I don't know. You need more of an admission than that?
Yeah. Pop takes half my salary, right?
Yeah, for what?
I'm sitting here with my father, right? Yeah. So you better give me.
I mean, it's an embarrassment and almost an admission that we no longer have a justice system, that nothing's been done to this man, and he's sitting in the highest office of the land.
That's precisely correct. Hunter Biden elucidates that in a text exchange with Devin Archer, saying, "Well, there's a higher cause here. We are a part of a great family, and we don't get prosecuted, right?" I mean, he straight up says it. You know, you're going to take one for a great American family. Ooh.
Well, they will be. They'll be the most corrupt family ever in the White House, without any doubt about it.
Yes,
and possibly the most perverted.
I would love to go back into your cinematic and TV history. I would love to do an entire show on that. It's certainly not what we booked you for here. I watched Seinfeld on Netflix a couple of years ago. I turned on Netflix, and here was at the very front, the splash on Netflix was Rudy Giuliani fights the gangsters. Right? It was this great documentary about you, and it was fighting gangsters and how your use of the RICO system that you became the world's master of as a prosecutor to wrap up the gang activity in New York. So now I must ask about this RICO charge in Fulton County, as you becoming like you're so sophisticated and so successful in RICO law that Netflix, who are not probably big fans of Republicans, did a glorious documentary on you. It was very interesting, and everyone should go back and rewatch it. So I just have to ask, like, what the hell? I mean, what the hell, Mayor? Like,
well, I mean, the case that is brought in Georgia, I do get up to the number two person in the case was next to the president, but it's not a RICO case. It's a case in which she is representing him as his lawyer on a valid claim that the election was stolen. Now, when you say valid, it doesn't mean it's necessarily true. It means there's enough evidence to contest it. That's what I have to do as a lawyer. And I have to look at the evidence, unlike other people, in the light most favorable to my client. So when I look at that film of Fanny, whatever her name is, and the other one, the two of them running around, throwing people out, having this gigantic box of ballots under a blanket all day, getting rid of all the public in violation of Georgia law, which requires the public to be there, casing the place to make sure nobody's there, and then opening it up and furiously counting these ballots. I have the right to have an opinion about that, which is that it looked criminal. Otherwise, they wouldn't have violated Georgia law and thrown the people out. not only do I have a right to do it, I sort of have an obligation to look at it that way as his lawyer. The rule is I have to interpret the evidence in the light most favorable to my client. I'm not just an ordinary citizen. And I'm getting prosecuted for that. I'm getting prosecuted for being a lawyer. And yes, arguing something somebody might dispute. I've never been in a case in which I didn't argue something somebody might dispute. That's what the case is about.
Yeah.
So this woman is a terror. But she is ruining the system of justice we have in America, which is adversarial. If you don't say what she believes, you're committing a crime. I mean, every time I say the election was stolen, according to her, I'm committing a crime. I don't have a right to that opinion.
But what's curious, Mr. Mayor, is that she has a right to that opinion. We have documented, and we went back through her social media, and it's documented dozens of times, well, at least a dozen times, where she questioned elections. In fact, Georgia elections, she has a long and extensive history of saying that, for instance, the water pipe bursting and stopping of the counting of ballots, saying that we better, like something funny is going on and that Georgia needs to come clean with what's happening. This went viral. The president's attorney says that they're going to use it in a filing, but Fannie Willis herself has a long and documented history in her own words and on her own writings of saying, oh, Georgia could determine our next day. They can start in Fulton where we're having water leaks. What ballots are they throwing out? Georgia, let's give an honest accounting. No stunts. Well, what exactly is that if not questioning an election? That's Fannie Willis's own words.
Yeah, and that's definitively been proven to be untrue. There was no water leak. That was an excuse so that they could close down the balloting, which, by the way, happened simultaneously in 5 other corrupt Democratic cities. Big coincidence, right? They closed down the balloting in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, in Detroit, in Milwaukee, in Minneapolis, and then eventually in Phoenix, Arizona, and Las Vegas. Only those cities, all of them well-known corrupt Democratic cities, where if you go to court against a Democrat, you got no chance in hell, just like those poor people in the District of Columbia.
Mr. Mayor, you went against Democrats in the city of New York. You won.
Another corrupt city.
I mean, it was a miracle even back then that you won in New York as a Republican and as a hard-on-crime Republican. They made Netflix documentaries about you. You were so successful in fighting crime, and in your mayoral tenure, you were called America's Mayor, and you graced the cover of Time magazine on a cool rooftop. I don't know which building you were standing on, but it was a really great-looking photo. I suppose I have a final question for you as it pertains to New York City and as it pertains to your tenure during September 11th. Joe Biden will be the first president to not mark September 11th at one of the tragedy sites. He'll be in Alaska instead on his way back from presumably another vacation. What does Alaska have to do with September 11th? And what is this? What is your commentary on this?
First of all, I'm glad that he won't be involved, and he doesn't deserve to be. He will be, in our history, the president we're the most embarrassed of. Hopefully, we will learn from him that we have to reform our system. I mean, he doesn't deserve to. He's a desecration to the memory of the people who died that day and then died after that in trying to secure our freedom, because he has killed more Americans than any American president I can think of. He's also killed a lot of Ukrainians. I mean, none of those people would be dead if Trump were the president. We know that. Putin invaded 3 times in the last 4 presidencies. He invaded under Bush, he invaded under Obama, and he invaded under Biden. He missed one. We know he wouldn't have. So to me, September 11 is a reminder that we can get together when the attack on our country is so huge and it's against everything we believe in, that we're no longer Democrats and Republicans. I really urge the Democrats to destroy their party and start over again. The leadership of their party has become not just corrupt, it's become, in some cases, like Biden, treasonous. They're destroying our form of government. They're destroying our way of life. We could talk about children in school. We could talk about their, encouraging the mutilation of children without the consent of their parents. We can talk about what they've done to American education, which has put us below the middle of the pack in the world. with the Communist Teachers Union. We can talk about giving bases back to China or giving away bases to China, letting them do fentanyl on us. An open border is an impeachable act in and of itself. I mean, the people that are coming in now, it's not like when I was in the Justice Department. I mean, they were some bad people, mostly good people. Now we don't know who they are. And we know the bad people are in charge of who comes in. Every single one of them is selected by the cartels. So when Adam says, I'm going to put him next to you, you got to quake in your boots. Look, Adam sent 30 people up to Buffalo a couple of weeks ago. The naive county executive up there, who's a Democrat, poor guy, accepted them. Within a day, they raped 2 people. He stuck them on a bus, and he sent them back, and he says, don't ever do that to me again. Now, a Republican county executive would be smart enough to say no, which is why you're not safe if you have a progressive Democrat DA or mayor. I don't know what happened to their judgment. The only thing that's going to fix this is a routing in 24 and a complete change. And they can reestablish a political party that has basic American values, and then we can go fight from there. It used to be pretty good when we were like that, 30 years ago.
Yes, that is precisely correct. You want that again, but you need to have a common enemy that is big enough to unite both sides. And I believe
there was that day, but right now we have a common enemy, and unfortunately, it's the leadership of the Democrat Party.
And people need to be awakened, and we appreciate you doing that, Mr. Mayor. Here's the Twitter account, the X account of Rudy Giuliani. You got to hop in there. You can follow 1.6 million people, 1.6 million patriots. Rudy, you also have a show and a program and a podcast. Is there any other way that our viewership can help you?
You can get me. You can get me on Twitter at 8:00 every night. I do a live cast. We've gotten over 1 million people on 3 of the last 6. So we're doing really well. I'm also on WABCRadio.com, 3:00 every day nationwide. So you can get me that way.
Ladies and gentlemen, America's mayor. Godspeed, Rudy.
Great interview. Thank you, man. Thanks. You do a great job, by the way.
Thank you, sir. What an honor. High praise.